Megan set her coffee cup down with deliberate care, her fingers lingering on the handle for just a moment. The cafe was quiet, filled only with a low murmur of conversations and the occasional clink of ceramic meeting wood. She had chosen this place intentionally. It was their spot, the one they had returned to for years. A familiar battleground for what she had assumed would be a decisive confrontation. "Maybe we need a break," she finally said, her voice carefully measured, both hesitant and firm. She wanted to land just right, like bait, like a challenge. Jason lifted his gaze from his coffee, his expression unreadable. His dark eyes held hers for a moment before he simply nodded. That was it. No questions, no hesitation. Just quiet acceptance. Megan felt a sudden tightness in her chest. "I just think we need some space, to figure things out," she added, waiting for some sign that he was processing it, resisting it. Jason exhaled through his nose, considering her words before giving a slight shrug. "If that's what you want." She blinked. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had imagined something entirely different. Him frowning, reaching for her hands, asking for an explanation, maybe even fighting for them. She had expected some kind of reaction, something to prove that she still mattered, that she was still the center of his world. She had seen it before in other men, past boyfriends who had scrambled to fix things the moment she pulled away. But Jason? He simply leaned back in his chair, took another sip of coffee, and turned his gaze toward the window, as if the conversation was already over. Megan swallowed hard, shifting in her seat. "So, I guess we'll see how things go." Jason set his cup down. "Sure." She hated how steady he was, how completely unaffected. Her fingers tightened around her phone as she pretended to check a message. Anything to break the silence stretching between them. Her stomach twisted uncomfortably. This wasn't how she had planned it. "You're not going to, I don't know, ask me to reconsider?" she finally said, trying to inject a teasing edge into her voice. Jason arched a brow, as if mildly amused. "Why would I?" Her lips parted, but no words came. His gaze remained calm, unwavering. "If you've already got one foot out the door, Megan, what's the point of me trying to pull you back in?" Her breath hitched. For the first time since sitting down, since rehearsing this moment in her mind, she felt the shift. She wasn't in control anymore. The script she had carefully constructed was unraveling, slipping through her fingers like sand. She forced a small laugh. "Wow, that's cold." Jason didn't flinch. "No, it's honest." He glanced at his watch, then back at her. "Are we done here?" Megan's throat was dry. "Yeah," she answered, even though it wasn't supposed to feel like this. A week later, Megan walked into the cafe again. Their cafe. Except this time, Jason wasn't alone. And that's when she realized she had made a mistake. At first, the days after their conversation had been easy. She had expected Jason to come back. He was steady, reliable, the kind of man who didn't give up easily. It was one of the things she had loved about him. His quiet, unwavering devotion. She had expected that devotion to carry over to this moment. She had expected late-night texts asking if she was okay. A call just to hear her voice. Maybe even an unexpected knock at her door. But the silence stretched on. By the third day, her confidence began to crack. She found herself reaching for her phone more often, unlocking it absent-mindedly, scrolling through her messages with a growing frown. Nothing. No missed calls. No unread texts. Jason's name remained exactly where it was, untouched, unchanged. She tapped on their last conversation, staring at his final message. It had been so casual, so effortless. "See you later." Except now. It didn't feel casual at all. It felt final. Megan kept telling herself that Jason just needed time. Maybe he was being stubborn, waiting for her to be the one to reach out first. That thought had comforted her, at least for a little while. But by the fifth day, the unease in her chest had become impossible to ignore. She did something she normally wouldn't. She checked social media. Jason was never one to post much, but she figured she might catch a glimpse of him through their mutual friends. Instead, what she found unsettled her even more. There was nothing, no sign of heartbreak, no indication that his life had been turned upside down. One of his friends had uploaded a picture from a weekend gathering. A casual night out, just a few people playing pool, laughing over drinks. And there he was, leaning against the bar, looking completely at ease, relaxed, unbothered. There was no trace of the quiet devastation she had imagined. He wasn't drowning in sorrow. He wasn't numbing himself with alcohol or retreating into solitude. He looked fine. Megan's jaw tightened as she locked her phone and tossed it onto the couch beside her. Fine. If he wanted to act like nothing had changed, then so could she. But the silence gnawed at her. It wasn't just quiet. It was indifferent. She had wanted space. Not this. Not to be so easily forgotten. She had expected him to fight, to remind her why she had fallen for him in the first place. Instead, it felt like she had never mattered at all. By the sixth day, she was desperate to shake off the feeling. She went out with friends, laughed louder than usual, took more pictures than she needed to, flooded her Instagram story with snapshots of a night that was supposed to prove, to herself more than anyone, that she was having fun, that she was fine, too. But even in the middle of a crowded bar, surrounded by people, she kept checking her phone. Nothing. By the seventh day, she couldn't take it anymore. Megan found herself walking into the cafe. Their cafe. The place where she had first told Jason they needed a break. She had come here thinking maybe she'd run into him. Maybe he'd be sitting alone, looking like a man with unfinished business, waiting for her to walk through the door and admit she had made a mistake. But Jason wasn't alone. Megan froze just inside the entrance, her breath catching in her throat. He was sitting at their usual table, but across from him sat another woman, Sophia Bennett. Megan recognized her instantly, though it took a moment to recall from where. Sophia wasn't flashy. She wasn't trying too hard. And yet, there was something effortlessly striking about her. She carried herself with an ease that drew people in, a quiet warmth, a presence that didn't need to demand attention because it naturally found her. And Jason was laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a forced smile, a real, easy laugh. The kind that came without thought, without effort, the same one Megan had once loved hearing. The one she had foolishly believed was hers alone. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. He was supposed to be broken, lost without her. He was supposed to be realizing, right now, that losing her was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Instead, he had moved on, and for the first time since saying maybe we need a break, Megan realized she had never truly considered what would happen if Jason didn't chase her, because she had never believed he wouldn't. But now, standing here, watching him lean in slightly as Sophia spoke, watching the way his expression was open, light, Megan felt something she hadn't expected. Regret. Her breath came shallow. Her fingers trembled at her sides. The cafe buzzed around her, the scent of freshly brewed coffee thick in the air. But all she could focus on was the man at their table. The man who, just a week ago, had been hers. Jason had always been steady, predictable in a way she once took for granted. She had assumed that even if she had pushed him too far, even if she had let go too soon, there would still be a trace of sorrow in his eyes, a lingering hesitation in his movements, some sign that her absence had left a void. But he looked free, and somehow that hurt more than she could have ever imagined. This wasn't the Jason she had expected to see. He wasn't staring wistfully into the distance, drowning in memories of their time together. He wasn't sitting alone, wallowing in regret, waiting for her to come back and fix everything. No, he was here, in this very cafe, engaged in conversation with someone else. And he looked happy. Sophia. The name echoed in Megan's mind as she studied her. The recognition came in pieces. Sophia had always been there, on the outskirts of their world. Never intrusive, never seeking attention, but present, a friend of a friend. Someone Megan had never thought twice about. Someone she had dismissed as unimportant. But now, as she watched them together, she realized just how wrong she had been. Sophia wasn't trying to impress Jason. She wasn't putting on an act, vying for his attention. She didn't have to. And Megan, standing there unseen, unmissed, felt the undeniable truth settle deep in her chest. She had let go of Jason, expecting him to hold on. But he hadn't. And now, it was too late. The snapshot from last weekend, taken at a rooftop bar, the city lights flickering behind her. She looked radiant, self-assured, effortlessly happy. The caption? Light, casual, carefree. Love a good night out. The moment she hit post, a wave of satisfaction rushed through her. He would see it. He would remember. Maybe he'd feel something. Regret, longing, a flicker of jealousy. But the feeling didn't last. Jason wasn't the type to overanalyze a social media post, to dissect its meaning, to spend his night debating whether to reach out. That wasn't who he was. He had made his decision. He had moved on. Megan inhaled sharply, forcing herself to keep walking. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely powerless, and it terrified her. That night, she lay in bed, phone in hand, the screen's dim glow casting soft shadows across her face. The post had done what posts always did, racked up likes, comments, fire emojis from acquaintances, a few DMs from guys she had barely spoken to. But none of them were the ones she wanted to hear from. Jason hadn't liked it, hadn't watched her story, hadn't reached out. The realization settled deep in her stomach, an ache that spread through her chest. She had been so sure he'd notice, that even if he said nothing, he would at least pause, look at the picture, take in the sight of her, and remember what he had lost. But no, Jason wasn't looking back. He had already turned the page. A bitterness she didn't recognize curled inside her. Why wasn't he struggling the way she was? Why wasn't he drowning in the weight of their history, the way it clung to her like a ghost she couldn't shake? She had expected a slow unraveling, a quiet, inevitable pull that would draw them back together. But Jason had rewritten the script entirely. Her phone vibrated, pulling her out of her thoughts. A message. For a second, her heart leapt, but it wasn't Jason. Tyler. Been a while. Drink soon? An old flame. Someone she had kept at the edge of her orbit for moments exactly like this. Someone who was always eager to remind her that she was wanted, that she could have anyone she wanted. She almost replied, almost let herself fall into the familiar comfort of knowing she still had control over someone. But as she stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard, something inside her shifted. This wasn't what she wanted. It was never about Tyler. It wasn't even about validation. It was about Jason, about the way he had walked away so easily, about how he had refused to give her the reaction she had expected. And that, more than anything, was what hurt the most. With a slow exhale, she locked her phone and set it face down on the nightstand. Minutes passed, maybe an hour, and then, impulsively, she picked up again. She opened their old messages, scrolling through months of easy conversation. Inside jokes, moments that once felt unshakable. Her chest tightened. And finally, she typed the word she had been resisting. I think we made a mistake. She hesitated only for a second before hitting send. The message delivered instantly. And then nothing. No typing bubble. No instant reply. Just silence. Megan stared at the screen, waiting. Minutes passed. An hour. And then, finally, Jason's reply came. Her pulse quickened. A flicker of hope ignited inside her, until she opened it. Message deleted. Jason had seen her words, and erased them without a second thought. Megan turned off her phone, and let the quiet swallow her whole.